I'm Nicholas Henshall, I'm the Dean of Chelmsford, and we're going to talk about saints, some surprising saints. I'm going to start by talking about St. George, but first I want to say something about the very word, saint, because it's stranger than it seems. In the New Testament, the word saint means one thing and one thing only. It simply means a member of the worshipping community, a practicing Christian, as we might say today. That's what it means. Much later on in the church's life, the word saint came to be used for a especially holy person, somebody who was seen as having a particular gift or lived a particular kind of life. But that's much more a secondary meaning, so it's worth bearing that in mind. The primary meaning of saint in the New Testament just means you and me. But what about St. George? Now, I want to celebrate George as a fantastic patron saint for our country. We fly his flag, and indeed, there's even a weather vane in the shape of a dragon on top of Chelmsford Cathedral, but more about dragons later. Who was St. George? Well, what we know for certain is that he lived in the late 3rd, early 4th century, probably died around 303 AD. And where did he live? Well, it certainly wasn't England. He was a native of what we might call Turkey or Syria today, and was born of Greek-speaking and Greek-cultured Syrian parents, Palestinian possibly. This begins to get really quite interesting and really quite complex. So very definitely not a Northern European, very definitely somebody who lived and died in the Middle East. But why did he die? Well, this is a profoundly challenging story for us, but a simple one. George was a soldier with a great career ahead of him. And the reality of being a soldier meant that people increasingly were needing to show their loyalty by making a sacrifice to the emperor. What that tended to mean was just burning a bit of incense in front of a statue of the emperor. And that may sound trivial and simple, but George, as a very committed Christian, knew that that meant he was denying his faith in God and the God revealed to us in Jesus Christ. And so he said, I cannot take that step. I cannot take that step. And with great regret, his commanding officer handed him over to be killed. And George died as a martyr for what he believed in. So that's the first reason I think George is a fantastic patron saint for England to this day, because he speaks of integrity and putting integrity at the heart of our personal and our public lives, values that we cherish and share together. And the second reason, well, this may sound odd, but I think it's really important. I'm deeply moved by the fact that in the Middle East, both Muslims and Christians venerate George as a significant figure. Indeed, there was a Muslim lifestyle magazine a few years ago that put on its front cover the flag of George and said, George is a saint for Muslims too. Not because they're trying to make something new, but because that's exactly the case down the last 2,000 years that we've shared this saint. Indeed, there are some churches and shrines in the Middle East where both Christians and Muslims go to pray together. So what a fantastic saint for modern Britain, a saint who transcends boundaries, not just denomination and culture, but of faith, a saint for everyone. But what about the dragon? What about the dragon? He appears on all the pictures. He's there in all the icons. He's there in the folk tales. Well, I'm afraid that's the bad news, because the dragon is simply a folk tale that in the 13th, 14th century got attached to St. George, but has absolutely nothing to do with his life. I rather like that. Okay, it's a great story about liberation from evil and fighting danger, but actually George's real story is much, much better. Somebody who stood up for their integrity and what they believed in, and today is cherished across boundaries of faith and culture.